All right, welcome everyone to a very special edition of SQW, the SQW Roundtable, episode 1, the greatest of all, is what I've dubbed it. I've got 3 very special friends with me today, emphasis. Only one of them you've met before, which is Nick. Nick, how are you doing there?
Good. You can't see me, and that's not like a John Cena reference. You just literally can't.
That just what it is right now. Next up, another very close personal friend of mine, Ross.
Hi, I'm Ross.
He does have a camera, so you get to see him if you're watching this. If you're listening to it, that doesn't matter. But
Does not. Don't listen to anything I say.
we consider him our elder statesman of our group, Ross. So his greatest of all time list tends to be a little different than some of ours.
I am the old man.
He is the old man. We call him Gramps. And last, but certainly not least, in his very sensual setting over there, we have Steve.
Heyo, and I'm definitely least, so that's fine.
Yeah.
So if this is Legends Roundtable, Ross is smoking Michael Hayes.
Yeah.
I'm just gonna be drunk DDP.
There you go.
Like, fuck it, Taz. Sorry. I mean,
Yeah.
I already did
You're
it.
fucking Taz.
I was hoping for King.
I'm just Gene Okerlund trying to keep everybody from just killing one another and trying to
Michael
keep the
Hayes, do I
censor.
have to go do a rail of coke real quick?
Everyone, you can't see it because it's all out of frame, but everyone's wearing a fanny pack.
Tell you what, brother, we've seen some
I
stuff.
think we're gonna have a little bit of backstory on this because this dates back to about a year ago. I was looking at our lists when I got the emails from you guys, and this dates back to about a year ago when we first started doing this.
Wow.
And October of last year is when I got all these lists from you guys. So things have changed a little.
Wow, I didn't think it was that long.
Wow.
It all stemmed from an interview that I saw online from Bret Hart, who always has an opinion of Ric Flair whenever he's asked.
No.
And this was a particularly old interview from Bret Hart, who said that Ric Flair will never be in anybody's top 10 or would never be in a top 10 of wrestlers of all time because every match is exactly the same from him, which you don't like Ric Flair, but let's a little bit here.
I'm a little
then that
shocked
got
that
us-
Brett would have that opinion.
I know, just a negative opinion of somebody in wrestling. That is surprising.
It's very
But the
rare
guy
for
that-
Brett.
Very rare for Brett.
So basically,
That
what
kick in the head, totally cool.
So basically, what that ended up doing was making us all think like, well, who do we think are some of the best the top 10 wrestlers of all time? Like, who really is on that list? Who's put out the best output of wrestling? And we realized that list is sort of what's the criteria for that? You know, Hulk Hogan's one of the biggest professional wrestlers of all time, but is he the greatest of all time? No, he puts on garbage matches, but it doesn't mean that he's not in the top 10. You know, so that kind of stuff. But it ended up spiraling into all 4 of us, and I have them printed out, stapled, and lettered right here. 100 wrestlers all-time lists from all 4 of us. And it is nobody else other than me. I'm the only one that knows what everyone's list is. So Steve knows knew who was on his list at one point. So did Ross, so did Nick, but they never knew who was on the other one's list unless I said something. Case in point, we're just going to get right into it now. Because case in point, Steve,
Oh boy.
sitting on your list, where was it? Sitting on your list at number 100, Train. So, so would you like to defend Ice Train being on number 100 in the talks for 100 greatest wrestlers of all time?
Well, he carried Scott Norton for years.
How dare you, sir?
Scott Norton, New Japan Pro Wrestling legend Scott Norton was carried by Ice Train in WCW.
I'm quit. I'm done. Now.
So that's where we're at. Also, Tugboat is here on your list.
Oh.
That's number 93.
Well, yeah. I mean, who doesn't love Tugboat?
That's good.
Alden's a great guy.
Pretty much everybody.
You do say, I don't know how accurate your list is in terms of ranking, but Tugboat is a better professional wrestler than Big John Studd. Kofi Kingston and The Godfather. So that's your Tugboat.
Okay. Yeah.
Has Kofi ever headlined a pay-per-view with Hulk Hogan? No.
Touche. And also Kofi Kingston wasn't one of the
for obvious
people.
reasons.
But you know, obviously, since Ross is actually probably the most interesting list, since he's got much bigger history with professional wrestling than any of us have. I'm going to say R100, Ross, because I know you had the same thought process that I had. I have to have him on the list, but I don't really want to talk about it much because you don't want to defend the choice too much.
Oh, I know who this is.
It's Chris Benoit. We both
I mean,
we don't really want to talk. Yeah.
All I'm going to say is that at one point, he was probably my favorite wrestler in the world for about 9 years or so. And something
When things happened,
changed. Yeah,
he had to go into an early retirement. And
yeah. He had to take a nap, and I had to sell my Bowflex, and
yeah. Okay. Well, but going on past that.
Yes.
I agree with you having Canyon on your list at number 99 here.
I don't remember that, but because I will defend that.
I know why he's on there, because it's the same reason he should be on anyone's list, and that's positively Canyon.
That is 90% of the reason he's on the list. I did like Mortis for what it was. Was he Wrath or was he Mortis? He was Mortis, right?
He was Mortis.
Okay.
It's Mortis.
Yeah.
I did enjoy that, but the Positively Canyon gimmick was probably one of the funniest things in wrestling history for me. I'm not a huge fan of comedy wrestling, but him just randomly giving diamond cutters to people backstage is still one of the funniest things I've ever seen.
Absolutely, just was fantastic. Sort of backstage wrestling stuff. He didn't equal much in the ring, but just sort of for entertainment value alone, it's memorable forever. And again,
how far up my list before I get to somebody who's still alive? Out of curiosity.
If we're going backwards, I mean, right ahead of Canyon is Kevin Sullivan.
Okay. Oh,
the real killer.
Coincidentally, close to Benoit.
Yeah, just a little bit better than Benoit, Kevin Sullivan.
Both of them at one point
Dick
in a relationship with the woman who broke me into puberty at some point.
Well,
that poster from Pro Wrestling Illustrated was a lifesaver when I was 13. But anyway,
thanks for that.
Yeah,
appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Yeah, but no, I mean, your list is exactly who I expect to have on it. Dick Murdoch at number 97.
Yes, everybody who doesn't like Captain Redneck, Dick Murdoch. who had a beautiful brainbuster, mind you.
You know, Larry Zbyszko, the living legend. You know, you've got plenty of living people on this list. That's
well, that's good. I'm glad he's not the dead legend yet.
I mean, yeah. I mean, but then immediately at number 95, you have the British Bulldog. So just. Right.
I feel like he's somebody that's probably higher on people's lists than mine, but
yeah,
I was never a
mostly.
Huge, I'm more tag team Davey Boy Smith than I am singles Davey Boy Smith. But.
I hear that. I understand that. But your list does have things like I until I get deeper into them again because I forget something. Did anyone else choose Hot Stuff Eddie Gilbert as one of their favorites, top 100 wrestlers of all time?
I'm going to go ahead and say no.
Okay. Hot Stuff Eddie Gilbert. He's the one who brought us Sting and the Ultimate Warrior in his faction stuff in Mid-South. Thank you very much.
Yeah, I mean, you know, Mad Dog Buzz Sawyer. I don't think that's on anyone else's list either because
he should be.
I mean, it should be. I'm not gonna give you crap for putting.
If you haven't seen the Piper Mad Dog Buzz Sawyer feud or any matches from it, you should. They're excellent.
Everything else is relatively common. Like, you know, these are pop up on multiple people's lists, except number 43, Terry Gordy. That did not appear on anyone else's list.
He's not on anybody else's list. I'm a little sad about that. I really like Terry Gordy. He was an excellent big guy.
Yeah, I mean, I saw it on your list and I was like, that seems like that would be in Ross's top 50. That makes sense.
I'm going to take that as a compliment.
Yeah, no, it's just like Terry Gordy didn't mean anything to any of us. Like,
yeah,
one of those things.
He was the executioner to us.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, he wore a black hood for most of our wrestling watching.
In that time period, there weren't a lot of guys other than like him, maybe Stan Hansen, and I'll even say Jim Duggan before he went full retard.
Oh boy.
There I go. But those are really the only big guys that could really kind of go in the ring, you know, and look intimidating. So,
do you have Dr. Death on your list?
I am positive I do.
Yes, Dr. Death, Steve Williams is number 37 on Ross's list.
Yes.
I figured if he had Gordy,
he's ahead of the likes of Rob Van Dam, Batista, Dean Malenko, and Nikita Koloff.
I'm dating myself. Clearly.
Yeah. Page one, just because each of these print out on 3 different pages. So page ones relatively look all of the same between all of us. And Steve are closer in age than we are to you, so there's a bit of a there's a bit of a 90s swing in our lists a little more than yours.
You guys didn't grow up going to TBS studios and watching like Ric Flair beat up on jobbers like I did?
That was not, you know, the West Coast wasn't really a hotbed in the early 90s of professional wrestling. So.
I'll be eating on my list. No.
Now, Nick.
Wait, is he on my list? Is Bobby eating on my list? Oh crap!
In my hand right now, and you had to put a qualifier next to one of your picks that I think you need to be called out on a little bit. Sitting at number 88 in parentheses next to it, you said, "Yeah, I said it." New Jack. Jack, one of the greatest wrestlers of all time.
New Jack.
Number 88?
New Jack.
Number 88. I'm going to tell you. who Nick put New Jack ahead of. Okay, New Jack. I don't know if your list is is appropriately ranked or not, Nick. Is it?
At some point, it stopped being appropriately ranked.
Clearly.
I started
Take
throwing
this-
Nick
guys
is
off.
just afraid of New Jack.
Yeah, if we take this at face value, New Jack is better than Hacksaw Jim Duggan,
That's true.
Tommy Dreamer,
Debatable.
Taz,
Okay.
Lita.
Okay.
Nick, I take umbrage with saying New Jack is better than Shibata.
At this, okay,
Maybe
again.
now. Maybe.
Well.
Goldust, Kofi Kingston, Big Show, and number 100 on your list, Randy Orton.
Yeah. That's how little I think of Randy Orton.
Yeah, no, I agree with you, Randy Orton.
Okay, so
ranking.
I put New Jack on the list based on the overall character. Because you could say, like, he's a terrible wrestler. A terrible wrestler.
Yes.
Like, love that character.
It's an interesting character. I feel like 2/3 of the way through, your list just devolved into top 100 wrestlers that have tried to murder people multiple times in the ring.
Well, if you're going on that, number 64 on your list, I do like the qualifier on this one because it sets a very specific era in which you're talking about. So number 64, you wrote pre-baby fat Rey Mysterio. Pre-fat baby Rey Mysterio. Corrections, I'm sorry.
Not fat baby Rey Mysterio.
Good Rey Mysterio.
Rey Mysterio.
Yeah, like WCW Spider-Man Mask Rey Mysterio was freaking awesome.
Yeah. So what you're saying is WWE Rey Mysterio, World Champion Rey Mysterio doesn't do it for you, but WCW, AAA Rey Mysterio.
Yeah, even ECW Rey Mysterio. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, you got Misawa on here, sure. Okada sitting at number 49 on your list. I bet you that was further up your list by this point, right?
Yeah, that was before January, obviously.
So, I'm going to focus now because the lists are relatively the same. I mean, what I'm going to do is we're going to focus on the top 20s on each of our lists because they're relatively similar. A lot of the same names pop up time and time again in the top 20s.
Oh no.
A couple of instances, and it's fine, nothing major, because there's no bad names in there. I'm going to say that. Nick, you have Jushin Liger in your top 20, which surprised me a little bit, but I agree. It's a good guy to put on your top 20.
Yeah.
I mean, everything's pretty much equal playing ground. So let's just start. Each one of us. Nobody agreed on their favorite wrestler. I'm assuming number one is just the first person that comes in your brain when you think professional wrestling. That's your favorite professional wrestler of all time. So
mine was my favorite of all time. I can tell you that.
Yeah, mine's my favorite.
Yeah. So
Same.
yeah, and I know personally, Steve's number one is his favorite of all time. So
Nice train.
So
Nice train.
appears 2 times
Tom
on his list. Just much like how on Steve's original list, he wrote Taz twice.
So much.
Both he wrote. I was disappointed that it wasn't single Z Taz and double Z Taz. It's like some sort of like quantum. Like I like ECW Taz more than WWE Taz. So. But no, in this case, Nick, the number one wrestler for you of all time, Undertaker.
Yep. I can't like, as far as you think about longevity and a guy who got better, like it's hard for me to like think anybody who has been a better professional wrestler ever than that guy.
it's hard to argue that. He's number 2 on my list because it's a terrible gimmick. I think we can all agree on that, right? Like,
It's a terrible gimmick.
It's
It's
the
awful.
absolute, like, and you just got some real trash out of it, like just some just that when you try to play into the gimmick, like him being killed in the Rumble or him wrestling himself, or whatever. Like, you got some bad mileage out of that gimmick, but it's still around. Like, he may be quote unquote retired right now, but we know he's not. And at least as of right now, I think we can all agree that he'll be back. But we know that everyone respects him. He's a backstage leader that nobody really has a bad thing to say about. And he's put on some of the matches, especially in his later career, have been just phenomenal.
Yeah. I mean, he's a guy that I guarantee is probably lower on my list than he is on anybody else's. And that's just strictly because I hate the gimmick. I hate the dead man gimmick. And that's the old man. That's the old man who grew up watching Buzz Sawyer and Terry Gordy and bingo halls. But
in terms,
and I'm the guy who enjoyed the big evil American Badass Undertaker more.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's a good gimmick.
So I mean, I appreciate
list rank.
his skill. Not a fan of the gimmick. Never have been.
He still mean Mark Calloway to you.
Yeah. You did rank him higher than Steve on your list. I will say that.
Oh, where did I have him?
You have the Undertaker's Ross at number 11.
And I have him at like 15 or something.
Steve, you put him at 13.
Oh, okay.
So
okay.
You think more highly of the Undertaker than Steve does, I guess.
I hate his gimmick, but I like him more than Steve.
So
that just goes to show you how much of an impression he's left on you as a professional wrestler. Regardless, you hate his gimmick, but you still ranked him almost top 10 of all time. So
it's hard to deny.
So how good was that gimmick when we were younger, JJ? Like when he came on.
What was that?
Just watching Undertaker was amazing.
It was like you knew you were watching something kind of crazy. Like it was just like it was something special watching him. It was just it wasn't like anything else really tossed at you at that time. Like it was good, but you realized it was also stupid. Like it's a zombie.
Right.
But and Paul Bearer helped exponentially.
Yeah.
Like
do you guys remember when he turned face and how big a deal that was?
Yeah, and the crowd was into it. Like they were ready to like the Undertaker and everything. That was so good. And he was world champion real early on in his run as the Undertaker, even if it was for like 3 days.
I remember watching that pay-per-view.
And can I say that Paul Bearer didn't help with me because, again, I'm old, and I was like, that's fucking Percival Pringle III, not the Paul Bearer. This is bullshit.
Oh boy.
Really, Ross is just gonna keep dating himself on every single one of these.
That's Steve Callis, and that's Percival Pringle III.
Yeah. Steve, your number 1 is probably the number 1 on a lot of people in our particular age groups lists. If you were to ask a lot of people who the number 1 professional wrestler of all time is, Bret the Hitman Hart.
Bret Hart, the man.
Yeah. The man. Yeah. The excellence of execution. The best there is, the best there was, the best there ever will be. Right. Even if we started this whole podcast off talking shit.
By shitting all over him, yeah. He was always, as a smaller guy, watching him go against all those bigger guys was just a lot of fun. And whenever you watch wrestling, you just start thinking about that kind of stuff. And Bret Hart, you watched him go from tag team to IC to heavyweight champ, and just like watching that story all the way through with really fast-paced matches that were different. He hooked me early on, and Brett fan ever since.
Yeah, I mean, I've never been.
Talk about Brett's book.
A lot of exclamation points.
Yeah, that book is a chore, I would say.
I loved that book. I read it like
It's
in a week.
great book, but it just keeps going and going and going. You could kill a drifter with that
How many
book.
times he cheated on his wife?
Exclamation point.
Exclamation point. I slept with 3 African women at one time.
Ampersand?
This show is going to just fall off the rails entirely. That's okay. I was never a big, huge Bret Hart fan personally, but that doesn't mean I didn't like Bret Hart did. There was no situation where you watched a Bret Hart match, especially in his main event run, that didn't feel like it deserved to be in the main event.
Right, him and Shawn Michaels.
Yeah, like he made
Bret
everyone wrestle against the main eventer.
Brett's kind of like the Undertaker to me. Not in that I hated his gimmick, but
You mean the no gimmick?
But it took me a long time to warm up to Bret as a singles wrestler because, I was used to 10 years of tag team, and I love the Hart Foundation, but as a singles wrestler, and at that time, it took a while for him to resonate with me. I think he never had a bad match in his life, I don't think, but and I'm sure he's very high on my list. I don't know where I put him, but I'm sure it's pretty high. But it took me
number 10, Ross. Number 10 on your list.
Yeah, it took me a long time to warm up to Bret Hart, and sadly, it was probably too long, really. But
it took Bret Hart's number 7 on your list, Nick.
Yeah, which is weird because I'm not the biggest fan of the man, but as far as the wrestler, you can't deny that. Yeah. Okay, this guy is awesome. So I had to separate my personal feelings from what's
I'm actually looking for Bret Hart on my list, and I'm like, did I not put Bret Hart on my list? But I clearly had to have at some point. But
wow. Bret Hart's great.
Oh no,
not on my list.
Bret Hart is actually going to call you, JJ.
There he is. He's number 32 on my list. Bret
Hart is pissed right now.
Bret Hart. Yeah, it's great. Yeah. Not a fan.
I'm going to be in the next book.
With lots of exclamation marks.
We're going to go to yours next for number 1 of all time.
Yes.
The Nature Boy. Buddy Ric Flair.
Which Bret segues into nicely as not being necessarily a fan of the man himself.
Yeah.
But
Ric Flair's made it real hard to be a Ric Flair fan in recent years.
Why? What
very
happened?
Difficult.
Just a couple of minor things throughout his career. It's not like he ever got anyone fired for being too drunk on stage or anything. But
how many people on any of our lists have made themselves better lately?
Yeah. Number 1 on my list is
none.
The number 1 on my list has been dead, so there's no getting better.
Well, I mean, I think all of us probably have Austin pretty high on our list, and he's actually a charming human being.
A single his entire life.
I mean, as far as Flair,
ask Deborah.
Yeah. My Deborah.
As far as
really not
Flair
much
goes.
Yeah, there's really not much to say about Ric Flair being number 1 on the list because the the Mount Rushmore of professional wrestling has Ric Flair on it, no matter what anyone could ever argue against, they would be wrong. Like, that's just plain and simple. Like, even if they're not.
As a kid in that era, I mean, I was probably, like, I don't know, I was about 10 years old, and during like '84, and it was Hogan or Flair, and being from the South, it was a lot easier to see the NWA and Jim Crockett, and which obviously influenced my entire list and my entire wrestling fandom. But that was Ric Flair was my guy, and Hogan was a lot of other people's. But up until late WCW, there wasn't really bad Ric Flair matches.
No, I mean, even late WCW, Ric Flair was still putting on. Like, even when the booking was terrible, Ric Flair played the game. Like, he wasn't going to go out there and he wasn't intentionally going out there to shortchange anyone. He wanted to put on a good wrestling match. That's always been a sort of thing for him. Like, even personal life aside, and the person that he is, and sort of the interviews that you see of him and things, like, Ric Flair as a professional wrestler was professional in, like, even when NWO was walking all over everything, like, he was still out there. He was no longer the focal point of that company, but he still went out there to put on his best match as he possibly could.
Yeah, even when he was wearing T-shirts.
Yeah. When he started getting self-conscious about being an old man wrestling, which he quickly gave up on.
Yeah.
Once WCW went under.
You're not fooling anybody.
Last time I checked, taking pictures of Elizabeth isn't very professional.
That is a storyline, Steve. We've been over this.
You're saying I should take that off my resume.
So on to me and my number one. My number one's always a little different because I don't know. It's Roddy Piper. Has always been my favorite professional wrestler of all time. Because I like a good talker, like, first and foremost. And even if it's hard for me to explain why I like Roddy Piper as much as I do, considering the whole is you want to see him get his teeth kicked down his throat. Like, that's the entire point of Roddy Piper. That's why WrestleMania was, in terms of booking, because Roddy Piper was a piece of garbage to Hogan and Mr. T, and you wanted to see both of those men just shove his fist down his mouth. Like, it's just he always. It probably helps that I met him before. Like, it probably sways my opinion a little bit, and seeing just how sort of nice he was. Now, I killed him by meeting him, clearly, because that's just how things work out. You can barely see it over here. If you look, you can see some of the autographs that I have over there. Here's Ric Flair, as we speak. So Roddy Piper's up there, the Ultimate Warrior's up there. One half of Chronic. I've got a Chronic autograph up there. So we're doing good as long as.
No, it's a Daniel Bryan poster. Take it down.
Oh, there's actually two Daniel Bryan posters over here, one of them's actually. So,
tell Brett to run.
Yeah, so that's good. That's good. I'm never going to meet, but. Roddy Piper was never a great wrestler. Roddy Piper was more of a talker than anything, but I think he took what little sort of skill he had and turned it into something absolutely blockbuster creating, like every time. When he was in a main event with Hulk Hogan, it felt like a main event. And it's both. Hulk Hogan may have been a guy, but they always make the play that without Piper, there is no sort of WrestleMania. There is no, what would have, it's hard for me to really too deep into it just because I just have always felt a good sort of wrestling connection with Roddy Piper, and that's just it's just how it's always been for me. It was one of those things where I had tapes growing up. He was never an active superstar in my youth. So
what, you didn't watch him and Bud Sawyer in the dog collar match?
I missed it live. But,
well, you know what? That brings up a good point. Like, he's one of those few guys on these lists that kind of, Ross saw him in Mid-South and we saw him in WWF, so he kind of splits those lists a little bit. Like, we all saw him at his peak.
Yeah, exactly. At different
one of my favorite matches of all time, the WrestleMania 8 versus Brett. That's one of my favorite matches ever. And
great match.
It's so good in that match.
Yeah, I think it makes a serious play because you have the best WrestleMania matches of all time, and everyone will always default to Steamboat Savage match of all time. But I think you can make a serious play versus Bret Hart being one of the best, competing against it as best WrestleMania match of all time. But it's just so Steamboat Savage just so ingrained in everyone's minds because WWE has always sold it that way too in recent years too, which doesn't help much. But
I always really enjoyed, as far as his WWF work, I have to specify that. But his feud with Orndorff after WrestleMania, which lasted about a year and a half, was probably one of my favorite Piper feud, really.
Really good. That was a really good feud. I rented every WWF tape I could as a kid because that was the best way to get more wrestling other than whatever the Saturday night show was or whatever the Thursday night show you can maybe catch on WWF wise. So Piper was always the one that I gravitated towards because it was just fun to watch a guy that you just really didn't like. Just kidding. Just his comeuppance and stuff. It was always fun.
Appeal to Flair's appeal to me too. As much as I love Flair, I couldn't wait to see anybody kick his ass because he made you hate him.
Ronnie Garvin.
I like Ronnie Garvin, damn it. He's probably on my list.
Rugged Ronnie Garvin.
I guarantee you he's on my list probably.
I am 100% certain I saw Ron Garvin deep into the. It was clearly one of those things that you're like, oh yeah, Ron Garvin. Yeah, number 63, Ron Garvin, right there. So
that's hands of stone, Ronnie Garvin to you, Nick.
The heart punch.
But also another person. Just to segue into something here, another person that you like to see. You're saying you like to see Ric Flair get his comeuppance from somebody. Nobody gave him his comeuppance better than somebody who is in the top 20 of each and every one of our lists. Dusty Rhodes.
Oh yeah, Daddy.
I don't think there's anybody here that can argue that Dusty Rhodes is just absolutely one of the singular most entertaining professional wrestlers of all time.
Nope.
That goes back to the Piper thing. I liked watching Dusty do non-wrestling things more than wrestling things half the time.
Yeah, especially during our era,
Right.
got to watch a much different Dusty than the Dusty that we got to see.
He didn't see polka dot Dusty.
I mean, even I, as old as I am, the Dusty I got was a lot different than the Dusty, that a lot of people, because he was already, he'd already gained a lot of weight and had slowed down a lot, even by the 80s. And but his charisma. I mean, I was at Starrcade '85, which is that was the first big event I ever went to as a kid, and you can't really tell by watching the network now, but the pop Dusty Rhodes got for his match with Ric Flair was just 100 million rednecks losing their damn mind.
Wait, did you just say rednecks?
I said rednecks. I don't. It was 1985 in Georgia. Okay, I don't know who. Everybody looked like Dutch Mantel in like trucker hats and sunglasses.
So I'm looking at all of our lists constantly here, and another name that pops up pretty much in everybody's top 5.
Lex Luger.
Rick Martel.
Mike Rotunda.
Yes, actually, the model is on every, but only the model. Everyone only picked the model. They didn't pick any other version of Rick Martel.
AWA Babyface Rick Martel.
Stevie Ray.
The Macho Man Randy Savage.
Oh, of course.
He is in the top 5 on. No, actually, he's number 6 on Ross's list. He broke my thing here, but
damn it! Didn't you kill him too?
No, I never got to meet Randy Savage, so I didn't kill him personally. That's somebody else's fault.
Okay.
But yeah, each and every one of us highly regards Randy Savage as one of the greatest of all time. I don't think any of us can really. There's nothing new you can say about Randy Savage. It has been said 1,000 times over. He had like charisma, like no matter what, even if he didn't know what he was doing in an interview, he would just it didn't matter.
I know one of Nick's favorite promos of his to watch, and mine, because we had a late night discussion about it several years ago. Was I believe it was in Mid Atlantic or Mid South. I can't recall the promotion. He goes on for 15 minutes about staring into a candle, and he's freaking crying. This is the most absurd thing I've ever seen in my life, and he's just tears are coming out of his eyes, and he's just it's unbelievable. You should YouTube that.
Wasn't it like I think Dutch Mantel had attacked Angelo Poffo?
I
and
think
that's why he was upset?
I think so. And it's just out there.
Yeah, but
staring at a candle, trying to get his head together.
No matter what, even in the like nonsensical state, like his promos were always just captivating. Like I have no idea what. It's not like the Ultimate Warrior where it's like I have no idea what he just said. It's I have no idea what he just said, but he meant it. Like
he said it with conviction.
Yeah, I don't know what he said, but I'm sure it meant that he's going to absolutely destroy whoever he's up against this time, George Steele or something. Like, whoever he's up against now.
Evil Crush.
Crush in the black and purple. I mean, we know what we know about Randy Savage, so we know that he had some of just no matter what, like he was very serious about his matches themselves. He put on some of the most like memorable matches of all time, like we mentioned earlier, Steamboat Savage, WrestleMania 3, which fantastic match, except I think everyone forgets that it had a schmaz finish. But
he drug Warrior
Randy Savage.
7.
I was going to say, I actually preferred that WrestleMania 7 match to WrestleMania 3. I was more entertained by that one.
Yeah, I love the WrestleMania 7 match.
It's absolutely fantastic.
Yeah.
One of my favorite Randy Savage moments is a late Randy Savage moment where his feud with DDP in WCW.
That was amazing.
Yeah.
That was
really good.
Like, it was DDP trying to get into that top picture. Like, DDP was, 45 at the time. Like, he was still, like, lower mid-card, really. I mean, the fans loved him, but he wasn't really doing much. U.S. champion at best kind of situation, but
Yeah, Macho Man, he really turned his like craziness like up a notch for that feud. Like he was just completely mental.
Was like
more so.
Yeah,
than
he
normal.
went from just like unhinged to actually borderline psychotic.
Yeah.
Like, which says a lot, because even later in his career, when he came back in the late 90s,
Be a man savage.
Yeah, Be a Man Savage, who literally chased down one of George or one of his, or Tori Wilson or somebody, and like hit her. Like that was part of the thing. Like he was an abusive boyfriend. Like when he became a hip hop star.
Oh, Bonesaw era Macho Man. Yes.
Bonesaw era Macho Man.
Yeah, I like to forget the like FUBU wearing like later era of Macho Man.
Yeah, the weird, because like
rag Macho Man.
Yeah. It's
like he forgot his wardrobe and he had to borrow something from Nash. He's like, I got to go out there real quick, Nash. Can you let me borrow some of your FUBU or whatever you wear?
You got on you right now, whatever.
Macho Man wearing Kanai.
It's sad to think that his like last sort of like match was in TNA. Like he had one.
No, it wasn't.
No.
That didn't happen at all.
TNA. What?
So we all agree, and we all agree in the top 100 greatest of all time, that Macho Man Randy Savage never once competed in TNA. Is that what we're agreeing on?
Nope.
That's right. That's right.
Never happened. All right.
Nope.
All right. If there's any consensus that we've come to on this particular show, it's that Savage for once.
We've decided a woman beating gimmick is better than TNA.
Yeah.
Yes. Yes. So,
honestly, actually beating women might be better than TNA.
Especially.
Which brings
from the
Stone Cold
South.
Steve Austin.
Yeah.
Beat Deborah.
Show of hands, who wants to beat Deborah right now?
What?
Okay, you're getting. I'm gonna pull the plug soon on this show. We just.
Sorry.
I mean,
You don't
if
hit
we're gonna
Deborah now. Wait till you have a Stone Cold IPA.
Yeah, if we're gonna talk about podcast hosts on here, I guess we might as well talk about Steve Austin, who is in. He is in the. Well, he's in everyone's top 10 except for one person. Who do you think didn't put him in the top 10?
I bet it's me. Or probably Ross.
Yeah.
I think I did.
Ross actually has him. Let's see. Has Steve Austin at number 3.
That's all based on his Hollywood Blondes work.
100%, or his U.S. title run.
Yeah. I think just more impact for him. It was very hard to decide, like, is it the best in-ring worker? Is it the best, like, known wrestler? Or I think for him, for me, putting him that high was just a combination of everything, like impact and ability, and
because like you go back to, early like WCW, NWA era Steve Austin. He was a fantastic in-ring worker in those days, especially in the Hollywood.
Not interesting at all. I had
but he was
no
just
interest
super,
in Steve Austin.
He was super uninteresting. It wasn't until he really couldn't wrestle anymore, like when he became Stone Cold Steve Austin, when his knees were all bad and he had to change his. Yeah, and he had to change his style up, is when he became interesting, which is kind of depressing in its own little way. Because imagine the Steve Austin wrestling ability of the early '90s with the charisma of an uncaged Steve Austin of the Attitude Era. Like we'd be talking on the level of a lot of the other guys on these lists. the same time, you can't take away that Steve Austin has probably had the second biggest impact on professional wrestling as an industry.
And you could really argue that Austin had the biggest impact positively and negatively on the business. As far as people still chant what? And thanks, Steve.
Not even. Yeah, it's the people that are screaming what at these events don't even know why they're yelling it anymore.
Yeah.
Because I mean, what chants were at this point a decade ago?
More than that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
that was that really started during the invasion, didn't it? 2001.
Yes.
Well, 2001, 2002. Yeah. So because he was torturing Lance Storm with that particularly too. So
yeah, in between beating up Taz, he would torture Lance Storm with what chants?
Good era for WWE. Nobody has a single negative thing to say about 2001, 2002 WWE. It was perfect in every way.
But we got the Hurricane.
We also, Ross. He is on both of our lists as one of the
greatest on your list
of all
too?
I think we can all agree that the Hurricane it's like the Undertaker, but on a much more minor scale, is the stupidest gimmick.
It's terrible gimmick, but it was so he did it so well. It was really fun.
It worked because he wasn't trying to convince you, the company wasn't trying to convince you that he really was a superhero.
Right. They portrayed it that he was a guy who was just into superheroes and started pretending to be a superhero. So they never actually had him have lightning shoot down from the ceiling or actually fly to the ring or use hurricane powers on anybody.
Yeah. The extent that they went to is that he used a choke slam as a finishing move, which is just it's funny because he's a small guy. But
honestly, one of my favorite wrestling moments ever is still when I was at the O2 Rumble, and when he grabs Austin and Triple H for the double choke slam. That is one of the funniest and one of my favorite moments ever. I mean, just because the way they both look at him, what in the hell are you doing? Yeah. And then they toss him out. So that is a perfect wrestling moment that Vince can't do anymore. But anyway,
it's wrestling comedy done right. It's hard to get comedy and wrestling right, but it's 100%. That is one of those instances of wrestling comedy done exactly how it's supposed to be done.
Exactly.
Also, side note, Vertebreaker, one of the best finishes ever.
Yes, it is.
Oh God, yeah. Another person that we all seemingly agree on being high up on all of our lists was probably not the newest for some of us, but for most of us, Kurt Angle.
Yep.
He is. Let's see. He is
Keith
number.
Jordan's dad. Yep. Put him on that list.
Dad. Little known fact: he was a professional wrestler before being general manager in WWE for professional wrestler. He was
that's probably an informative fact for some people, but
yeah.
So he's number 4. He is number 7 on Ross's list. He is number 10 on my list. And he is number 12 on Steve's list. So, I mean, it's unanimous. Steve. Did you just forget about Kurt Angle, Steve?
Explain myself if I had any idea who 1 or 2 through 11 were.
That's a good point. Should we just go through Steve's list then, if he wants to try to defend himself? Maybe he moved
Steve's list.
A little Let's go through it. Let's do it.
Yeah, so Steve is Bret Hart. Number 2, Shawn Michaels.
Okay.
Number 3, Randy Savage.
Yep.
Number 4, Ricky Steamboat. Number 5, and 1 holds, Chris Jericho. CM Punk. Number 7, Daniel Bryan.
Oh,
Number
wow.
8. Number 9, Dusty. And number 10, Roddy Piper.
There you go.
So,
I get the solid top 10, actually.
I mean, nobody on that list is bad. I just, I take some umbrage, but I think part of it is just how long I've been watching wrestling too. It's hard for me to put Daniel Bryan in a top 10. And again, I haven't watched. I don't watch Ring of Honor. I don't watch. The indie.
If it were like, I watched him as Bryan Danielson.
Right.
I have when he is number 7 on my list, I have a much more in-depth relationship with him. It's like CM Punk.
It's the Washington thing, isn't it?
It helps that he's a local boy, and he's a Seahawks fan. It helps.
That's right. That was a lumberjack for crying out loud.
Kurt, besides Shawn Michaels, Kurt was one of the last guys that they had where you knew if he was in the ring with anybody, it was going to be pretty much, if you want to go by the Meltzer scale, it was going to be a 4-star match no matter who he was fighting at any time, at any show.
Honestly, if I was to redo the list, I would switch Angle and Bryan. I mean, if I had to do anything, but whatever.
I'm sure, considering a year has passed, there's some notable omissions or lower rankings in terms of wrestlers these days, because my list is the newest of all of these lists. My list I made according to my Google Sheets, what I made in February of this year.
You cheated.
Yeah.
So I cheated. No. So I have different. My top 10 includes Okada and Omega.
So yours is right after Wrestle Kingdom.
Yeah. So it's right after. It's at that point, it's I'm now officially 100% into New Japan Pro Wrestling. So I'm now going out of my way to watch old New Japan Pro Wrestling stuff. So.
Well, and honestly, the last people that made me happy watching WWE are CM Punk and Daniel Bryan. So.
Yeah.
Wow.
I mean, honestly, I can't really argue.
Can you argue with him?
No,
if
you think about it, you probably, yeah.
I mean, I really like AJ Styles, but he's not in a position to make us happy because there's there's just not the opportunity to work with people or to do anything interesting. It's just not there.
His program with John Cena was phenomenal. Pun semi-intended. But who does AJ Styles who's on his level?
Nobody.
Nakamura.
Nakamura, and he's not gonna get Nakamura anytime soon in this company. They didn't even know what.
Honestly, I think the last time all of us were happy about something is when Kevin Owens won the world title. Does that sound about right?
Probably.
Yeah,
probably right.
I thoroughly enjoyed segment of Kevin Owens with Chris Jericho and his their friendship and that way that storyline played out. I thoroughly enjoyed
probably the last fun good angle that they've done.
Yeah.
I mean, other than Corbin and Ziggler.
Yeah. I mean, obviously.
Is Dolph Ziggler on anybody's list? I just want to know.
On my list.
Yes.
I bet he's on my list.
Yes. I know. Let's see. He was
There's
somewhere.
probably on my list.
Yeah, I know he's on Steve's list because I saw it earlier.
I feel like he wouldn't have made the cut.
He is number 74 on Steve's list.
I needed room for Kevin Sullivan.
Well, you know what the funny thing is? Steve and I used to be a lot higher on Dolph Ziggler than
I think we all did.
I love.
He's 79.
I remember the night he cashed in, and we were just freaking out.
Oh, it's so good.
Coincidentally, last time he was interesting.
Yeah. Once he literally right now, to date this episode, in case you, for whatever reason, you listen to this in a couple years' time, you idiot. He is copying people. That's his gimmick now. The ever popular copying people gimmick that is always,
because it was so great when Big Show did it.
Yeah.
Even better when Sandow did it.
Yeah, Sandow was doing it. Well, at least Sandow did other things other than wrestlers, but it was Magneto that one time.
Who cares less when they're in the ring right now than either Dolph Ziggler or Randy Orton, like, about what's going on?
Randy Orton.
Yeah.
I agree.
You can see, I mean, there's videos of him laying on the ground after getting caught, looking at the fans like, are we still on TV? Can I get up now?
Are we done? Cool, bye.
Yeah. He doesn't. Randy Orton is one of those guys that I don't know how he's so boring on TV when he could, you go to him just as a regular dude, he seems kind of like an entertaining dude. Like, despite his horrible backstage attitude, he just
he just needs to be heel stuff. That's what he needs to be all the time.
Yeah, he needs to be he needs to have a gimmick that lets him be charismatic, because he has that possibility, he has that potential, but he just doesn't.
The Viper does not do it for you.
No.
I was okay with Legend Killer Orton.
I mean, the thing about Randy Orton for me is, he's not the worst. Obviously, there's plenty of one-off champions. He's not the worst world champion of all time. But to me, by far, if you look at all the guys that held multiple world titles, like 6, 7 world titles, if you look at the list of all the people that have world titles like that, he clearly stands out as by far the worst multiple-time champion.
Yeah.
He's had 12 times.
Yep. Champions, well, thanks for reminding us, and now I'm bummed out.
Yeah, no, the podcast is over. We've decided the worst wrestler of all time is Randy Orton.
He's on Ross's list.
Yeah, he's 100 on Ross's list. He's 100 on Nick's list. Just keep that.
He's probably on mine too, actually.
I think most of it is he has the potential to be better.
Yeah, I mean, it's more.
And
he's done a lot of stuff, and the potential was there, and he had periods where the Legend Killer gimmick was interesting, or his time in Evolution was kind of interesting. But I mean, it's been a decade since Randy Orton's been interesting, and I feel like I think I put him on my list, it's really just because he has 13 world titles inexplicably.
RNN Randy Orton was funny.
When he was injured and not wrestling, Steve was really
that was actually a really fun, it's a percentage every week of how his recovery is going. There's been a bit of a setback, so now I'm down to 74%.
I liked that. That was funny. That was 20.
Yeah, it was.
That was funny.
Because he had something to prove at that point. Because he was barely a wrestler then in WWF. So
it's pre-gym bag Randy Orton and post-gym bag Randy Orton.
Yeah, exactly. That's how we rate our. Do you on your list, Nick? You're the only person that put this quantifier as if we would think it would have meant anything else. Number 8 on your list, you wrote Ted DiBiase Sr. Did you think for 1 second us would have thought you went Ted DiBiase Jr.?
Now, one of us. I know Steve is the biggest Ted Jr. fan I've ever known.
He had potential, damn it.
But yes, I feel like I had to put that there.
The guy whose the last leg of his career was him holding tailgate parties in WWE parking lots.
DiBiase
you needed to make sure that we didn't think you meant at number 8, Ted DiBiase Jr.
Look, I just would come up, so I had to put that quantifier in there.
You could have just written $1 Million Man.
Well, no, like, you know what, like, if you go back and watch some stuff even before he was $1 Million Man, he was actually a fantastic wrestler. Like, he was almost NWA champion, correct?
Yeah, he had a great run in Mid-South, especially with Bill Watts. He had really good face and heel runs in Mid-South and the Southern Territories. And there was a time where I think I've read that they were floating, putting him as NWA champ. Him and Flair fought a few times, but I don't think it never really took off. But he was a guy who I was really high on before he even got there. And when I first saw the gimmick, when he got the $1 Million Man gimmick, I was like, oh, well, here goes Vince giving another territory guy like a retarded gimmick. And,
and it lasted for like 12 years.
Yeah, I mean, pretty much. And then, like, it was one of the few gimmicks he actually gave a territory guy that actually ended up being great. But I watched guys like Dusty and Terry Taylor and Lex Luger and all these guys come in and get these just awful gimmicks. And it was just whenever I heard like one of those guys was going to the WWF, I'm like, oh, Ron Garvin signed the WWF. Oh, that's going to be great. I was actually surprised that they just made him rugged Ronnie Garvin and they didn't like make him come out in like, I don't know, like the get up they had Regal in to prove how rugged he was.
Ted DiBiase is my number one. I can't believe he wasn't world champion.
Yeah. Well, like 100%. Like you like at some point, as you think there's no better person to have a champion run towards, like in terms of needing to like put somebody over that you needed to get over than Ted DiBiase. Like him with the title could have gotten that you needed to get over for the champion.
He would have been the perfect heel to have people chase. And I guess the problem was by the time they got the title off of Hogan, and which I was elated. I was over at Hulkamania after the first year. So I was the guy who watched Saturday Night's Main Event who rooted for Nikolai Volkov. But but you know, by the time they finally got the title of him, they had a stack of guys who were ready for the world title and needed it. But you know, it's like, who do you give to? Well, Macho Man, you know, who ended up with it, because supposedly DiBiase was going to win WrestleMania 4 and get the title, but then I guess.
Yeah, I heard that too. He was really supposed to win it.
Yeah, that was the original plan.
Yeah, and but you had Macho Man and you had DiBiase and you know, Andre was floating around, but you had other guys too that were all capable of being world champion and were just kind of backed up in the pipeline because Hogan had it for like 4.5 years before he dropped it.
Yeah, he had it a while.
It was a very long.
There could be do we all have the same guy that Ross is kind of talking about, like who should have been world champion but wasn't? Like Rick Rude.
Rick Rude.
Yeah, Rick Rude. At least like had a sort of mainstream championship run. It may not have been with WWF, like and worldwide, like WCW. Yeah. Like he, I mean like he was
world class, world title, right? But you know, also his tag team champion run with Manny Raging Bull Fernandez. Just so
he did not appear on your list, Ross. I don't know.
Do I have Fruit on my list?
Yeah.
No Mad Bull.
No Mad Bull.
Oh, the Raging Bull. Surely I have Rick Rude on my list, right?
Yeah. Oh, every one of us have Rick Rude on our list. So,
I was gonna say. I thought you meant Rude for a second. I was like, I clearly was drunk when I did that then, but
no. He's relatively high up on everyone's list. So
Raging Bull Manny Fernandez not on my list.
DiBiase didn't even have the IC title.
Yeah.
But
he was champ, that's it.
What were they doing?
But also, like Mr. Perfect, should have had a world title run, and
I don't feel bad about him not having a world title run as much as some of the other guys because, as Intercontinental Champion was sort of super important to the WWF at that time. Like, it's sort of like The Miz right now. Like, I kind of wish The Miz was never world champion because, this is like
because nobody wanted him to be world champion.
It's one of those things like that's always good. He was world champion once, which means at any given time they could put him back in that sort of spot, even though they need him where he's at.
Yeah,
in the mid card hot, putting on great matches with people that need to be high up on the card that people want to see wrestle. But
I mean, there was that long period of time where not only was Hogan had the world title, but you had the Honky Tonk Man with the Intercontinental title for like a year and a half. No titles were changing hands other than the tag team title for almost 2 years.
Yeah.
Well, and Perfect never even feuded. Yeah.
Okay. Huh?
What?
Are we still? What? Is everyone there?
I'm here.
I was about to say, Perfect never even feuded with any real main eventers through his run.
Yeah. Never really.
And so it's hard for me to feel bad about him like I do DiBiase.
Well, like DiBiase was like main event, like a pay-per-views and stuff. It's like it's just kind of.
But Perfect was arguably probably one of the best Intercontinental champions ever.
True.
Yeah. Not even arguably.
Yeah.
No, I mean he was.
And what was so weird is technically DiBiase, he bought the world title. I don't know I guess they don't count that, but. How it had to have been Hogan saying, "I'm not going to lose even in a screw job to DiBiase. I'll only do it to Andre, who will then just give it." Because they could have just had DiBiase fight Hogan and done the exact same angle, and it would have been a little better than doing the whole awkward thing with Andre the Giant, who's never had the world title in his 30 years of wrestling, is just going to hand over the title. Okay. I don't know. That always bugged me a little bit.
Before, wasn't it Hogan and Andre? What? I can't even remember what the hell happened. Where DiBiase got a bye or something? They
had a double. There's a double DQ with Hogan and Andre.
Oh yeah,
yeah, it was a schmoz finish, and but they also had their first round buys, anyways, kind of nonsense and stuff.
Yeah. But that was at the Saturday Night's main event.
And it's 5 minutes long.
Yeah.
That Saturday Night's main event, that was when we found out that Dave Hebner had a brother named Earl Hebner, or as Hogan thought, that clearly DiBiase paid somebody to get plastic surgery to look just like Dave Hebner.
Oh, come on.
And screw him out of the world title. How much did you have to pay the surgeons, brother?
You think about Hogan. You look back at him complaining about guys cheating. You're like, what a Nancy. when Sid threw him out of the Royal Rumble, he just oh, shut up, dude.
Hogan,
I think
as a face was clearly in the wrong 95% of the time.
Yeah.
As opposed to now, where he's 100% in the wrong.
And he used a heel moveset his entire career.
We're supposed to root against Randy Savage for Hogan hitting on his wife.
Yeah. This is a good segue that we've led into because this is another one of the top on everyone's lists because he has to be is Hulk Hogan. Yeah. None of us are really fans of Hulk Hogan. Now in particular more than ever.
Why? What happened?
I don't know. I am blocked by him on Twitter, so I don't actually know much Hulk Hogan news these days. So,
yeah, me too. So,
I went to his beach shop in Clearwater.
there must be some sort of. You must be going through something right now. Must be a touchy subject.
No.
It's so weird that he's not
like,
around.
Yeah.
A legend like Hogan not being around.
So, like, he's relatively high on everyone's list because wrestling revolved around Hulk Hogan in the 80s. Like, you can't deny that. Like, wrestling hit a peak because of Hulk Hogan, on a couple of different occasions. Like, not necessarily because of Hulk Hogan, because Hulk Hogan made the right business decision at the right time. Like, the whole rock and wrestling era of Hulk Hogan, where, the 80s, Hulk Hogan was world champion 4 years straight. Nobody could do anything about it.
It was
like,
painful.
I mean,
for me, I enjoyed the Hulkamania initially because, I was old enough to watch it as it occurred. And initially, it was exciting. But for me, even as a kid, it didn't take long for that to this has been a year of the same thing.
Yeah.
I'm ready for something else. I want to see Piper win. I guess that was an early smart. But
yeah,
I wanted to see Piper win, or I wanted to see Macho Man. And after 2.5 years, I didn't want to see anybody win. Like, I didn't care who, just anybody. And I'm praying Nikolai Volkov is going to win on Saturday Night's Main Event.
And
Hercules is going to do it.
You get to even late into his the end of his WWF run, like WrestleMania 9, like that garbage.
So brutal.
He did that more than anything ever.
Yeah.
As somebody who doesn't even like Brett that much, that was BS.
It was, yeah. That was. I mean, for me, I'm way bigger fan of WCW. I mean, let me rephrase that. NWO Hulk Hogan. His early WCW Hulk Hogan was actually worse.
It was
than
actually
WWF Hulk Hogan.
It was actually so. I've been watching when the network came out. I watched sort of a lot of his early stuff, and it is absolutely hilarious to see him recreating his WWF run.
Oh yeah,
from start to finish.
Yeah, it's the same exact stuff he had done 10 years earlier.
He specifically was bringing in big wrestlers just so he could he brings in John Tenta to be Earthquake, or be not Earthquake, Shark or whoever it is this week.
Yeah. I mean, he brought in Tugboat, and he brought in Beefcake, and he brought in Earthquake, and he Orndorff showed up, and all these guys that he had already run through.
Yeah, he brought in giant haystacks with the intention of making him be another giant man for him to beat up, but it never got anywhere because he was terrible. Even for Hulk Hogan, he was terrible, if that says anything.
Yeah.
But that's why Randy Savage was there. That's why all these guys, just him trying to recreate him a star, and
he got booed. The WCW crowd turned on him super quick.
Really quick, because he was already getting booed in the WWF in the first place. It was exciting, but when his very first match is beating Ric Flair, and the WCW crowd, where Ric Flair keeps losing to Hulk Hogan, is going to turn sooner than later on Hulk Hogan.
Exactly.
Even though, yes, Ric Flair is the heel, it's still Ric Flair, and it's still wrestling, quote unquote.
He was so much smaller during that run too. It was just weird.
Why? What happened?
But then he shaved his mustache. That was the Pastamania era or whatever, wasn't it?
Dark Side
Commando, he shaved his mustache and he lost 50 pounds.
Yeah, Thunder in Paradise era.
Paradise Hogan.
It was just his early WCW run was terrible. Heel, and the first 2 years it was great.
Hollywood Hogan, up until, again, the Starrcade 97, you could call it a screw job or whatever, the botched ending on Starrcade 97 is the point where you're like, okay, I've had enough of Hollywood Hogan now. Also.
Yeah. Starting, once you hit 1998, you were like, I've had enough of this. Like, it's the same. It's now officially the same. And one time you had the opportunity to sort of breathe life into something, still had to go with your schmozzy Hulk Hogan politicking finish of count, even though we all watched it. It wasn't a fast count.
Yeah, a fast count that he kicked out of at the 3. He kicked out at 3 on a fast count.
That was like Bret Hart's, like, that's first storyline in WCW. Like, this is
Bret was
so bad.
Oh, I've made a terrible choice.
I've wasted my life.
I've made a huge
mistake. They have you do is come out and work a program with Hulk Hogan. Like, that's like the guy that screwed you over nonstop in WWF that you just came from. They're dragging you out there to
not even that, but
work
like
a program with Hulk Hogan.
We just signed you, Bret Hart, and this is a huge coup for us. And at our biggest pay-per-view of all time, we're not going to have you in a match against anybody. We're going to have you as a referee in a Hogan and Sting match, where there's going to be a massive screw job.
Wasn't he a referee in a different match, and he just came out?
He was referee for Bischoff and Zbyszko. He was referee for Bischoff.
Yeah, he was the referee for Bischoff and Zbyszko. And he came out because he's like, I'm not going to let anyone get screwed over ever again.
You're right. I forgot about that. That's even worse, actually.
That's even worse.
That's more.
Yeah, Bret Hart just, boy, Survivor Series 1997 just ended everything for him. Like, nothing good ever happened in his life ever again.
Bret Hart probably actually like leaned into that super kick.
Leaned into the Goldberg kick.
End it all. He's like, because I just don't want to do this anymore. He just pushed forward and just took a kick straight into the face.
Goldberg, take me up.
Okay, we have I'm going to say 2 more people to talk about till we start mulling over who we really think. So the more shared people on everyone's sort of high up list, Shawn Michaels on people's list. Except I think on no, he's pretty much high up on every single person's list. Top 10, every person's list.
More so comeback tour, Shawn Michaels for me.
Yeah. So Shawn Michaels.
Michaels.
So,
Gavin Stone himself. Boy, he wasn't Gavin Stone, but whatever.
Yeah. So
unintelligible shoot interview of Shawn Michaels. I might have,
I like how we talk about somebody that we clearly all. This is like the 8th time we've done this, where it's clearly somebody we all love, and we bring it up and we immediately just start shitting all over him.
I think that's more about us
kind of what
them at this point.
That's kind of what we do with everything.
Like, this is not new.
That we're all Lance Storm. Like,
like, newsflash, we're all kind of dicks.
Yeah. Sorry to break
about how much we like something. We'd rather just shit all over it.
But so, like, yeah, it's number 6 on Nick's list. He's number 8 on Ross's list. He's number 6 on my list, and he is number 2 on Steve's list. I mean, it's pretty universally accepted that we think Shawn Michaels is one of the best professional wrestlers of all time. Like,
tell us all about his Midnight Rockers run, Ross.
Look, the Midnight Rockers were clearly a Rock and Roll Express ripoff. I was not a fan.
When they were wrestling at the Showboat in Vegas.
I really wasn't, but and I'll be honest with you, if Shawn Michaels never came back, he would. I don't know he would even be on my list if it was just the first half
It's his
of his
second
career.
run.
Yeah, I agree.
Like his run after he came back from injury after losing at WrestleMania 14. That run is one of the most impressive professional wrestling of all time. Like,
I ordered that SummerSlam pay-per-view only for that Triple H Shawn Michaels match when he came
why
back.
wouldn't you? I mean, that was a big deal. Like, Shawn Michaels, like, Shawn Michaels, but even before that was like one of my absolute favorite professional wrestlers. So to have him back was a big deal for me. To have him wrestling another match again was a big deal for me. Like, that was,
and they're
I
doing
couldn't wait, even though it was a,
they're doing
It
a
was
street
huge.
fight, and like if we're supposed to believe Shawn Michaels, like he could barely walk for the last like 3 years.
Yeah.
So like I'm watching with the thought that, well, I guess I'll get to see Shawn Michaels paralyzed. Taking all these crazy back bumps, and I'm like, okay, well, that was fun. I guess it's going to be great to watch him die.
He was gone a long time. Like, he was gone so long.
And then he came back and wrestled in jeans.
Yeah.
Yeah. With that Bible verse on his wife beater.
Well, then he had like the poop brown tights for a little while.
Yeah,
When
he won the title.
When
he won the title.
When he won the championship, he had the plain brown tights with the like
Bob haircut.
He looked like a Jim Crockett jobber. Here's Pat Rose against Ronnie Garvin.
Michaels is still top 5 for me, even without that second run.
Yeah. I think the second run sort of solidifies him as like one of the, like, he was already a personal favorite of all time of mine, but that second run like solidified it. Like, boy, Shawn Michaels like is important to professional wrestling. Like, I can't think of like
era, because there was at that time there was nobody else that, again, other than Kurt Angle, and their feud with each other was phenomenal, but there was nobody else that, again, he was those guys that if he's in the ring, it's guaranteed 4-star match no matter who's fighting, and he was so adaptive to everybody else's styles, whether like his retirement match with Ric Flair. He wrestled Ric Flair's style match in that, and then he would go and wrestle a completely different style against, I don't know, Rey Mysterio or whoever.
Undertaker.
Yeah, Undertaker.
2 straight years with 5-star Undertaker matches.
Yeah. He had his WrestleMania match against Kurt Angle was phenomenal.
Yeah.
His WrestleMania match against John Cena was really good.
Like,
he wrestled Jericho at WrestleMania too, right?
Yeah.
Like that highlight with him and Shelton Benjamin is still one of the coolest moments you'll ever see in WWE.
Yeah. Like one of the favorite matches I've ever seen live in person was his WrestleMania 19 match against Chris Jericho. Like, that's a really good, because that was his big return to WrestleMania as well.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
And so, and he, it's like he never missed WrestleMania. Like, it was a phenomenal wrestling match and like the best match on the card.
Benoit. That Benoit match was really good.
Who? Sorry?
Yeah.
The triple. Oh yeah. Him versus Triple H versus someone.
Versus a shadowy figure.
Yeah. Noob Saibot versus Triple H versus Shawn Michaels.
It's so bizarre, but like,
or as me and Nick, used to joke, placing him with John Cena. So,
in all caps. John Cena in all caps.
Yeah, that's
his whole second run was so good. It's actually easier to point out the one or two things that suck, which is pretty much. And one of those two things is one of the funniest moments in wrestling history, which is when he fought Hogan.
I loved it. I loved it so much.
That sucked, but that was one of the funniest freaking things I've ever seen in my life.
It sucked in an awesome way.
that is one of the most easily rewatchable wrestling matches of all time because of just how insane it is. and it's
Hogan
hard,
doesn't
like,
get it.
No, he doesn't.
It's like Hogan doesn't understand. Like, I think he thinks that Shawn Michaels is making him look strong.
Yeah, Hogan's like clearly into it. He's like, "This is gold, brother."
And it's just like it's like the most passive aggressive petty thing ever, and it's amazing.
That and the whole lead up to that match was absolutely. Do you remember the Montreal?
Oh yeah, with the fake Bret return.
Oh, he came out. He did the Bret music.
Yeah, fake Bret Hart thing, and he comes like the first words out of his mouth is Montreal, who's your daddy? Like, it was just like this perfect.
He could still work heel when he wanted to, but
he didn't. Yeah, because he just went all in for it, and he knew that he was getting screwed because it was supposed to be.
The worst thing he did in his second run, to me anyway, would be that goofy DX reunion. You know, where they were feuding. When they were feuding with Spirit Squad and fighting God. You know, that's not as bad as it got.
Stream of matches against the Spirit Squad, like,
or bearing legacy, basically.
Yeah, yes, they did.
Like,
they did do that. That's right.
But that was. We have two more wrestlers that we need to sort of cover. The Rock. It all.
Yeah.
High up on everyone's list. It's kind of hard to talk about The Rock. Like, for me at least, like, very few things I can think of stand out as being like, you know, this immortal moment of professional wrestling outside of his, like, a couple of, like, the Hulk Hogan match going back to Hogan. Like, it's just The Rock was just good. Like,
you know, but
I wish he would have never came back.
Yeah, I was going to say the exact same thing.
I was going to ask, do you like The Rock less now than you did before he came back?
Yes, I do.
And I do too.
Yeah, he retroactively made The Rock less important to me just by his return.
Like I said it before, like John Cena made him look like a chump on the mic, and so did CM Punk.
Yeah,
they did. Yeah,
and The Rock, like, because I don't know, The Rock got so used to Hollywood. I don't know, like, he just kind of, everything felt like it wasn't anyway.
It didn't feel organic anymore.
Yeah, like it was The Rock doing
world title Rock. Like, my favorite Rock is Intercontinental, Triple H, Ken Shamrock, Owen Hart Rock, or
Yeah.
I mean, The Rock had, for me, and I've seen a lot of wrestling, but it was definitely one of the most exciting. Like, he made everything exciting. You know, he certainly wasn't the best at anything, but everything was always exciting.
Yeah. I like a thing that I like about The Rock in terms of his actual, like, in-ring wrestling is sort of the exaggeration he did for a lot of things, but didn't make it like,
better.
Yeah, but didn't make it like absurd. It was just sort of like arrogant exaggeration, like, you know, shaking his leg out before doing a kick, or like these big sweeping slaps and punches and things. Like, he over exaggerated like every move that he did, but like not like
I mean, it wasn't like in a Hogan type of way, or, you know, he walked the line of being ridiculous and, I don't know, and realistic at this time. It was very gray area there where, all his stuff was hyper exaggerated, but just enough to be believable enough to pass for pro wrestling. It wasn't circus, you know, like, and that was one of my favorite things about him, was the way he would oversell things, or, you know, the flurry of punches, or he just, you know, had that charisma. I like. Oh, go ahead.
I was gonna say, the People's Elbow is a really cool move, but the fact that they tried to turn it into a finishing move is utterly absurd.
That drove me freaking bananas. And when he started pinning people with a people's elbow, I was like, I'm out of here. I can't.
It's a really cool, like, that move would have been really cool.
With that.
That move, really cool, like, exclamation point or like an insult move or something.
Yeah.
Like, that's a move that he does after the rock bottom. Like,
Yes.
I've put you down, and now I'm just gonna, now I'm just gonna drop this charismatic asshole elbow on you, as like just to really drive in that nail into your coffin. Like, but like to have it be a standalone move that he could finish somebody off with was.
It was terrible. For me, as much as people talk about him being one of the greatest talkers of all time, which I guess is true, but
at times, like, he was, but
for every like Austin thing he would say that was really cool or really funny, he would then say something that made me cringe so hard, like I physically could feel would be embarrassed or blush. When he would start going on a tangent about like monkey nipples and stuff like that, I'm like, it was so bad. He was so great and so terrible at the same time.
Yeah, he got into that like rut of just like make just a constant stream of like pie and strudel jokes like every week. It was just another just.
Well, it was all like homophobic jokes, and which I love now when he comes back and he's like, I'm just gonna I'm gonna call Rusev gay and I'm gonna slut shame his wife and. I'm just going to run down the entire roster real quick at WrestleMania before I go out here and light my flamethrower. Nobody's going to get a chance for any kind of comeuppance. And yay, The Rock.
He was a lot better when he had like going back and forth with someone. Like a one-on-one interview could go off the rails real fast. But if he was in the ring with The Rock, or if he was going back and forth with Jericho or someone like that, he was at his best, usually.
I mean, he could have killed Chris Jericho's debut. I mean, Jericho still made it out of it.
Pretty okay, but all things considered.
And the same with Booker T when he's like, who in the blue hell are you? Like, are you kidding right now? Like, it's funny when you do it to a jobber on TV that everybody already knows. Yeah. But you're introducing Booker T is from WCW. It's like, who in the blue hell are you? Oh, well, crap.
Yeah, thanks.
Womp
womp. But it's okay. Booker T got his big moment in the WWE.
I'm sorry, what?
Yeah. He got at WrestleMania 19, everything converged into the perfect storyline.
Obviously, he beat the clearly racist Triple H in what was a brilliantly designed angle, so authority overcoming. Ah, shit.
Oh wait, he lost.
Wait a minute. I'm looking at my notes and no, that didn't happen at all. And Booker T was just made a chump in that company for like another 3 years.
Forever.
He didn't debut until he was King Booker.
By the way, I have to tell you guys, my favorite Booker T thing in the last 10 years is you looking real jacked, baby. You looking real jacked.
Baby. Real jacked. I get that you're a little freaked out by what Rowan's doing and you don't know what to say. But repeating "you look real jacked tonight, baby" 20 times is maybe not the thing to say. Awkward silence would have been way better. Yeah, you looking real jacked, baby. Shucky ducky quack quack.
Shucky ducky. If you ever want to see a guy that is just realizes that they're not gonna fire him and can just do whatever he wants, watch Booker T in TNA because he starts he spent the bulk of that run using a fake accent.
Oh yeah. I was gonna say I'm gonna tell you now. No, I'm not gonna watch that. But also, I've seen the clips of him just having this what was it, an African accent or?
Like a weird, it's nothing. It's not a real accent of any one nation. It is just I'm going to talk in an accent, and that's just Booker T now. Like, it's just him realizing that TNA is going to do nothing to them but give them checks until they decide to leave. And it's infinitely entertaining. I know nobody wants to watch TNA anything, but I do recommend watching it.
Coming soon to WWE Network.
Sooner than later. The one last person I think we need to talk about that's relatively high on most people's list is the one person that everyone also never wants to talk about, and that's John Cena. The number one guy in like professional wrestling for what's it been now? Yeah, like 15 years. Been like longer standing run in the WWE than Hulk Hogan did. Like as the face of the company, selling merchandise, selling championships, whatever it is. John Cena has just absolutely dominated professional wrestling, even if
it's really sad. And I feel like you can tell that John Cena feels like it's really sad because he clearly has just been saying it lately.
Yeah, he's like, this whole storyline that he is doing right now with Roman Reigns is him saying, like, you guys have messed up. Like, I should be able to wander away for a year and not have to come out here, but I cannot because you have put all of your eggs in this Roman Reigns basket and no other basket at all. And the few times you had people that could potentially were young enough to replace me and be the number one guy, you scared off or you buried immediately. So.
And maybe I even buried him, but I want to walk away now.
Yeah, I mean, he's clearly not innocent in any of that.
No. Despite whatever he wants to tell you otherwise, like, nobody believes that he is 100% innocent on any of these.
He did not want to bury the Nexus, JJ. He said he didn't want to do that.
But here's the thing, like, it's hard to argue. Like, the last 3 years, dude, I've actually enjoyed Cena.
Yeah.
He's been better the last couple of years, yeah.
As much as he's been, like, part of the problem for over a decade, he's now, sadly, the most enjoyable part of the show.
Yeah, he was working.
So now he really can't leave.
Butt off to not be the problem anymore. Like, he's like, well, I'm going to lose to this guy. Please do something with him.
My favorite thing is he's come back and put everybody over except Baron Corbin. Nah, screw that guy.
No, there's nothing. I mean, I can't argue with that, to be honest.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
He's right.
We all defend John Cena's decision on pinning Baron Corbin. Really pinning him, but also making sure that he doesn't have the Money in the Bank briefcase at the same time. Like, I will lay down on free TV to Shinsuke Nakamura. But, you know, you're gonna have to pay to watch me beat Baron Corbin on national.
I will be goddamned if I lose a mouth tummy.
Like, it's hard to argue the importance of John Cena's had on professional wrestling over the last positive, negative, whatever it is. He put wrestling into that sort of pop culture stage again that Hulk Hogan did for the WWF back in the 80s. Like,
yeah,
started watching wrestling because of John Cena at this point. Like,
yeah, it's a very miniaturized version of Hulkamania. I mean, it certainly didn't have the impact of it, but it's there.
Yeah, it didn't have the sort of like multifaceted sort of pop culture impact that it had, and it's nowhere near the impact of like what Steve Austin had on professional wrestling in like 1998. Like 1998 was the biggest year of professional wrestling of all time. If you break it down to like pay-per-view buy rates, TV ratings, whatever it is, 1998 is where wrestling hit its absolute peak and never sort of regained that in any way, shape, or form. But John Cena, like he's a household name at this point, like wrestling, which is weird to think. Like,
there's
there's not many.
People
and the
know
fact that
him.
it's John Cena.
Yeah.
I think everybody feels the same way about John Cena. Like, well, okay, I guess he's on my list. Like, nobody's happy about it. Like, nobody's like, at least our age, nobody's like, oh, well, yeah, I love John Cena. I mean, it's just more of a reluctant, like, yeah, I guess. It's like paying your mortgage. I gotta do it. Sure.
Necessary evil. Like, it's just like he's a big. If John Cena's career was like 5 years shorter or something, like I loved early John Cena, like just as he was sort of shedding the hip hop gimmick, like he wasn't leaning on it as so much. So like that early era of John Cena, U.S. champion forward kind of stuff was
like post-rapper,
really
pre-Marine John Cena.
Yeah, like he still had sort of the hip hop thing going for him, but he was also, not kissing dog tags every night.
I guess part of my thing is I'm frustrated that like, oh, he can actually have a good match now, and you had all this time, like, oh, he could have good matches.
Yeah, like he's now at that stage in his career where he's like, oh, now I actually need to show, like, I need people now to remember me as a wrestler and not just like where it's like, he was more of a TV star than he was a professional wrestler. And so now it's like, when I wrestle AJ Styles, I'm going to put on an actual wrestling match as opposed to.
And I'm going to try to do a springboard stunner. No.
Oh, no, that didn't happen either.
It was never a signature
Watch
move
him
of John.
Russell TNA, and Cena doesn't do the springboard stutter.
His matches with Punk were actually really good, and
he never had a bad match with Punk. Like Punk brought out the best of him as a professional wrestler, and
of his recent stuff, the most disappointing I felt was him not putting Rusev over at WrestleMania.
Yeah.
And
like he came out in a tank, man. Come on.
Yes, that was amazing.
Well, and he just buried Bray too. Like,
yeah. Something like Rusev can never like recover from, like, despite everyone loving him now, like his time to have been at the top, like gain that top position for at least a couple of minutes, there's like now completely gone. Like it's so sad. Like, and then John Cena makes his return just very recently in the last few months. Like, here's a flag match against Rusev, and I'll be going to hell if Rusev is going to win this match.
Well, let's follow up your flag match debacle with Cena with, I don't know, let's Randy Orton feud, and let's have him beat you in 3 seconds. Awesome. Love it.
I have
Cena and Orton all the time.
That's the kiss of death. Yeah.
As soon as I see Orton come out like to the ring against somebody like I'm into, like I'm like, oh, Nakamura. Oh shit, that's Randy Orton's music. Yeah.
Now I'm sad.
And that's been for like 10 years. Like anybody I like, as soon as I see like Orton's going into a feud with them, I'm like, well, this sucks.
It's not going to get anyone over. If anything, Orton's going to come out exactly the same, and the person that he's going to either, if he loses to this person, that person's going to get no rub off of it.
Most motivated he had been in ages. They put him in the Wyatt family, and that was actually kind of interesting.
Yeah,
it was.
And then, let's end that prematurely and have that great WrestleMania blowout.
With the cockroaches?
Yes, let's project cockroaches on the ring. And then we'll follow that up with an empty house match.
Which he lost.
Yeah.
And then he gets the feud with Jinder.
Current, as of recording, still Jinder Mahal.
Just a reminder, I canceled my subscription like 2 days ago. So
subscription, will you be able to watch Jinder Mahal versus Shinsuke Nakamura in Hell in a Cell?
I in theory, I would be able to watch it because it expires the next day. But will I be able to watch it? I don't know.
But will your soul let you watch it?
No. We'll find out.
You're not captivated by the racist promos that Jinder's been cutting on Nakamura?
Like, I'm not going to lie to you. That's part of it. That is absolutely part of it.
It's really bad. Like, I feel like Jinder's out there. He's like, oh, God, I don't really want to do this. And, like, he's doing it anyway. And Vince is backstage just, like, falling on the floor, like, laughing, like, thinking back to that Gilligan's Island where, like, the racist, like, World War II Japanese soldier guy.
Yeah. Like, I feel like it's just so tone deaf right now. Like, no, this is not cool, man.
Yeah.
Like, Michael Hayes has wrote all of those promos.
WWE, like, to officially apologize now for those promos, like for the super racist Jinder Mahal promo. Like, they had to put out a press release apology about how just tone deaf racist promo was.
Like when
Raven. The thing is like they killed Jinder's like whole thing, which is like he's like, oh, you guys only don't like me because you're racist. He had a point until he started saying a bunch of racist shit.
Yeah. Like it was like, okay, yeah, and it's like, oh, now you're racist.
Oh,
yeah, you're racist. Okay.
Vince doesn't get subtlety very well because he did the same thing with oh God, what was his name?
Muhammad Hassan.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, he did the same thing. Oh, you don't like me because you're racist. You think I'm a terrorist because I'm foreign. Oh, no, wait, let's have him actually dress like a terrorist and kidnap somebody and put like a black hood over them.
Yeah, you have
so now I am a terrorist.
Yeah, you have a bunch of booted, like, balaclava-wearing terrorists piano wire the Undertaker out of the ring on the day of an actual terrorist attack. Like, wrestling's great, guys.
This is gold, pal. We should just,
Let's have
him bomb a fake embassy.
Vince was like, when that happened and that ended up airing on the same day as bombing, like, him personally wasn't going to end that storyline then. Like, full well it was everyone around him that was like, Vince, we can't now. This is not a
Vince
thing.
Like, what's the big deal?
What ratings?
Yeah. Like, he was probably trying to think of a way to like rig it so like we'll have the Undertaker's pyro explode or something.
Like, this just, man, it's just like, I feel like it hurts my soul. Current wrestling in so many ways. It just hurts my soul to watch it. Current WWE.
I'm looking at, I took our top fives. Wrapping this up now. We are in the final stages of this because we've been going for who knows how long at this point.
We've got 8
I've broken down all of our lists, and one name pops up like in the top fives, and it's one of those things like don't think we agree that he is the #1 professional wrestler of all time, but I think we could also all agree that calling him that necessarily wouldn't be the end of the world. But Steve Austin is like high up on every single list. Like no matter like in the top 5, he's on 3 of the 4 lists in the top 5.
Yeah.
Think of Steve Austin, like of calling him best wrestler of all time. Like, what's your opinion on that?
I think that it's just his run was too short where he was good. It's just he had 2 maybe 3 years where he was like able to go and was around and not hurt, and I think it's just it's just too late by the time they really figured it all out with him, and that's what keeps him from being the best ever. Had we gotten 10 years of that, then maybe
5 years
Sure.
of his huge Austin run, but like he got hurt so much and early on, and like if it went from like he may have been top dog, but he wasn't because you had The Rock come in and stuff, like and Triple H made his climb to the top and stuff. Like he got hurt, he was able to take a back seat and was just never not be the focal point anymore, even in the later stages of his runs. Like if he had a good solid 5 years of being just the only guy, I think we'd have no problem.
I think part of the problem with Austin is that his run up to winning the title was great, but once he actually became champion, every time it was like, all right.
Like the best part of Austin's title runs consistently was just his feud with McMahon, and it didn't have anything to do with professional wrestling. It was just his interactions with Vince McMahon. Remember about Steve Austin, like his run in the company was just his interactions with Vince McMahon.
That's a good point.
Yeah,
I mean, I enjoyed his feud with The Rock. I mean, his feud with The Rock around WrestleMania 17 time. I really enjoyed that one. But yeah, you're right. It was mostly just Vince.
Yeah.
I'm still saying that's really a bad thing. I'm saying
probably the biggest boom period of wrestling. Well, at least for like probably me and JJ, he was the top guy.
Yeah.
But none of those fans stuck around.
Nope.
And it's really hard to say that he was the best ever when he didn't change.
It was very much a product of its time too, in that Springer era shock TV. It was all very like a tornado, just all kind of coming together at once. A perfect storm, I suppose.
A Texas tornado.
Yes.
He was dead by then. But
there are 3 names in particular outside of Austin that keep reoccurring on the high up on everyone's list. Maybe not top 5, but I think after talking and stuff, some of these lists would shuffle and change a little bit and make their decisions. So I've taken some creative liberties with these a little bit. But outside of Austin, you have Flair, Savage, and Angle. Those seem to be the 5 like we all being like Kurt Angle's sort of this weird one on there, because can we agree that he had some of the greatest professional wrestling matches the WWE had in time frame where he was wrestling. He consistently had some of the greatest professional wrestling matches of all time. Pure, solid wrestling matches.
For sure.
Yeah.
And his charisma is highly underrated. I mean, his charisma is
highly underrated, but it's one of those things like, does he have anything other than like the milk and like, the little like things like that? Like he didn't really have like singular storylines that really sort of like.
Oh, I was just about to say that with Kurt Angle, it's everything is a match.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's no feud.
I mean,
I have good storylines, but the matches really sort of were the focal point of every single one of Kurt Angle's like feuds anyways. So
like I enjoyed like kind of wrestling machine era Kurt Angle.
Yeah.
His final run in the WWE when he was doing the ECW thing.
Yeah, that's bad.
Was like that, but like the actual like but the actual gimmick of Kurt Angle then was really good. Like it was just down and dirty. He was an aggressive wrestler at that time. He was wearing like the MMA style like mouth guard. He changed his look up just. And it was like an MMA style wrestling that he was doing. It was like a little more aggressive. It was down and dirty. It was like a really cool Kurt Angle, and it would have been cool to have had a little bit of that. Like
it's like this guy's legit badass, so let's just let him be that.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. But unfortunately, he could only use that gimmick against people that were in WWE's ECW at the time. Like, what was it worth in the end? It wasn't like it may have been a great gimmick, but it didn't get to do anything.
Also, I don't know if it was his best feud, but it's tough to pick like his best feuds because his feud with Michaels. I mean, he had a lot of great feuds and series matches, but I feel like his feud with Eddie Guerrero was maybe his best, if not one of my favorites, just because like both of them had such great comedic timing, and again, it was a perfect example of like comedic wrestling working perfectly, with Eddie's cheating gimmick and Kurt's like over serious, kind of thing, and all the stuff with the boot coming off and the chair, pretending to get hit by the chair and all that stuff. That was both of those guys at their best, I think.
Yeah,
I think Kurt Angle with Edge, he had that really good Edge, and they had really good matches. Those were probably the two when they were both at the top of their game throughout that entire too.
I like the feud with Brock. Like that Iron Man match is still pretty dang good. It holds up.
Yeah. And if he didn't try to kill himself in WrestleMania 19, man, that would imagine where that match would have ranked, like in the annals of wrestling lore. Like
if he hit the shooting star press, yeah.
That was
on his head.
Yeah. So we got Angle, Austin, Flair, Undertaker, Randy Savage. There's top 5 of ours based on all of the stuff that we've done and all of the lists, and sort of based on rankings and what we've got and who appears high up and where they high up on everyone's list.
I like a solid top 5.
What was that?
I think about a solid top 5. That's right.
Yeah.
I didn't hear that. It's
Go ahead, Steve.
Oh, I was gonna say I forgot. What about Michaels?
Oh yeah, Michaels was. Michaels would have been, Michaels is like it got thrown off because he was super low on somebody's list, and I can't remember.
Was it mine?
So we're all agreed Okada's the greatest wrestler ever.
Yes.
Well, I think at this point, if these lists were done, because he's on my personal top 5 list. But none of you others had seen him really at this point yet. So
Okada, I've seen Okada already.
Yeah,
I've only seen one Okada match, and I'm sad about that. I just don't have the willpower to seek out wrestling like I used to. I blame Vince for that.
Okada would be in my top 20 now. Easy.
He'd be in a lot of people's top 20 if it was more accessible.
Right.
I mean, so JJ, did you average out some of the top rankings to see if that proved or that decided who our number one wrestler was?
Basically,
after Mag metrics.
Yeah, basically, I just sort of took a lot of. I just took a lot of here on this list, and there really was there was, I have a notepad of just like, okay, like there's lines and math and stuff. And honestly, at this point, one is Steve Austin. Like, he is so high up on everyone's list universally. Like, if it weren't for him being so low on my list, Bret Hart would have been sort of high up, a little higher up, so you can blame me for Bret Hart not being higher up than he is.
So who's got Ric Flair low? Out of
probably me.
Me and Nick.
It's
young whippersnappers.
Twist. Not because I think he's 19, but because my everything after my sort of like top 10 favorites of all time just sort of devolved into, oh yeah, that's a wrestler that I like.
Yeah,
I'm glad someone else did it like that.
and I'll be honest, if I was 32 and not 42, he probably wouldn't be very high, or he wouldn't be certainly wouldn't be my number one.
But yeah, you know, well, that should make a difference. If he's your number one, he's your number one, though, man. That's like, you know.
It's just one of those things. Like I still have never been able to, in watching wrestling all this time, as exciting as the Attitude Era was, I still don't think I've ever been able to quite replicate the feelings I got watching like that Horseman era of feuds, you know, with those guys, and it's definitely dated. It's not for everybody, and maybe that's how everybody is with, you know, their whatever era happened at their youth. You know, I mean, you guys.
Well, right now, so we talked about Steve Austin, who was high up on all of our lists, and like based on all of that stuff. The number 2 person that pops up would be on it would be Randy Savage.
I love the Macho Man, but he's not the greatest wrestler of all time.
Yeah,
I'll just say that.
I agree.
I think we all agree with
wholeheartedly.
that.
Yeah, he is. He has probably the best sort of like one of the best libraries to go back to, and sort of like you could just pick out Randy Savage promos or feuds and just watch the matches on them, and you're always 90% of the time gonna have perfectly enjoyable professional wrestling. And
Now,
he never peaked the way some of the other people peaked. Like, you know, he had his time on top, but it was short-lived, or it was always in the shadow of Hulk Hogan. Like, I think there was one title had that didn't involve Hulk Hogan in some way, shape, or form, whether it be losing to Hogan immediately, or Hogan helped him or something. Like, his career has always been dampened by somebody else, and him just be a professional wrestler.
Well, even the time he won the title, it had nothing to do with Hogan. It was at a WrestleMania where he didn't main event and Hogan did.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah.
So it's always Hogan.
Yeah. Always.
Next up would be so next up would be Shawn Michaels on the list. Like, I think we can all agree that doesn't. And again, it's the same thing as Randy Savage. Like,
well, all bias aside, I would pick Michaels as the best ever. Like, if
I mean,
I don't think I would argue it, honestly.
Yeah.
That's
well, at this point. At this point, I think the real fight between us right now is Shawn Michaels. We both agree with Steve Austin and Randy Savage. It's Shawn Michaels and Rick.
Wow.
Basically, on this list, if you follow it to heart, it's Shawn Michaels, Ric Flair, Hulk Hogan, Dusty Rhodes is super high up on everybody's list too.
As he should be.
Like,
when we did our list, did he like just die?
It had been about a year, hadn't it?
Yeah,
No,
maybe.
I don't think so. I think he didn't die last year.
We were all sentimental.
Maybe.
Yeah.
I don't know. He would have been exactly where he was on my list, even if he hadn't died, probably. But maybe it probably affected you guys more than me.
he would have been higher up, obviously, if I had seen him in his prime like you did.
Exactly.
Right. Same here. Yeah.
So really, the question everybody wants to know is, where is Arn Anderson?
Not high enough.
On Nick's list,
you can make the argument that he's the most underappreciated wrestler of all time.
I would not argue that 1 second.
No way.
Nick's list, Arn Anderson is number 16.
Whoa.
Ross's list. On Ross's list, Arn Anderson is not on page 1, Ross.
What?
Oh, snap.
That doesn't seem right. He's got it. I must have just missed him. That doesn't seem right. There he is. I did look past him. Thank God. I was getting worried.
I was worried.
13. I just kept.
Okay.
I saw Ole Anderson, and I was like, "There's no way he put Arn Anderson after Ole Anderson." So I've got to go back.
Yes. I like Ole, but come on.
Carl, Ole, Gene, Arn.
Let's see.
Even I never
Steve,
saw Gene Anderson wrestle.
He probably is. He should be. Probably like in the 30s, probably.
48.
There you go.
48 on your list. Got him at 44.
Can we just make Arn Anderson our greatest wrestler of all time?
Yeah.
From your lips to God's ears.
And really, it's easy to point out that the differences in ages, like you see where he is for me and Nick, and then for JJ and Steve, who were broke into Arn Anderson as part of like the York family.
The Brainbusters Arn Anderson.
The Brainbusters Arn Anderson.
Yeah. So,
But the good thing is our ages kind of gap. So you're the oldest, and I gap between Steve and JJ. So we kind of covered a lot of.
Yeah, it's kind of funny to see that, but
yeah.
Like my greatest Flair memory is the '92 Rumble.
That's a great memory, though, man. That's honestly a great memory.
It was great.
If you
honestly, as the guy who put Flair at number 1, like I don't even really think about his WWF tenure at all. Like it's the early one. I mean, the '92 Rumble was great. Don't get me wrong, but he was still in Hogan's shadow, and like it didn't feel right to me at that time watching it. Like it was like the Road Warriors in WWF. It just never felt right. And
so I honestly I think because like we know that Ross wouldn't agree to make like Shawn Michaels the greatest professional wrestler of all time. I'm not saying that you don't think that he's a great professional wrestler, but he was such a big part of like me and Steve wrestling watching that it's hard for us to think of like, not Shawn Michaels being top, 5 kind of situation.
It's just a weird thing where it doesn't sound right when you say it.
Yeah.
It doesn't.
I think if we were to all say, like, Ric Flair, that's the sort of, like, the elephant in the room. There is, in terms of raw charisma, like, on the microphone, very few touch Ric Flair. We agree with that?
Yeah.
It's better than Michaels, yeah.
Yeah, and in the ring, as unselfish and also very and just was able to put on a phenomenal professional wrestling match, no matter what. Like,
I think a lot of our debate comes from thinking of late career Ric Flair too much.
That's a major issue. Like, it's hard to. Especially
like,
for
honestly, if you had asked me before Evolution, Ric Flair still would have been my number 1 wrestler of all time.
Yeah.
And that doesn't cloud it much for me, but for other people, I can see where that like extra 6-8 years of stuff, would cloud that for sure. I mean, I get it.
With Carlito era Ric Flair.
Yeah. Intercontinental Champion era Ric Flair.
But
So
I watched him drag Road Warrior Hawk to a 60-minute Broadway match that had the fans and the Ami on their feet. So I have an appreciation for that.
Which is why
but Hawk had no business in the ring with Ric Flair for 60 minutes.
Yeah, well, Shawn Michaels wrestled Tito Santana at WrestleMania 8, and it was comfortable.
He wrestled Rick Martel the match and he couldn't kick him in the face.
Through all of this, through all of this 8 hours that we've done, they're gonna kick us off of Google soon if we don't. We've talked about it enough. We've talked about every wrestler that we love, that we hate, like what we hate in particular about the wrestlers. That's the one thing we focus on so much, what we hate. But I think we can all universally agree through all of this talking that none of us would argue saying that Ric Flair is the greatest professional wrestler of all time at this point.
I will not argue that.
No, it's Flair. Yeah, it's Flair.
The official
Steve
ranking.
Got enough beer,
Ric
so
Flair
will agree.
Yeah. So the official ranking, I will say, is Ric Flair number 1, 2. Does that sound right?
Yes.
Yes.
Randy Savage number 3.
And we're gonna put Okada and Omega in there just so they exist off in the corner saying they're but
Ice Train.
Barry Windham, but the stalker Barry Windham, not the good Barry Windham.
Stevie Ray.
Tugboat.
Could you imagine
New Jack?
They went through Tugboat's heel turn that they planned where he was going to actually be the Iraqi sympathizer? Could you imagine?
I would have been super into it.
I know.
Super into it.
I hated that Slaughter storyline so much.
Like the visual of Tugboat, like in like the drab Iraqi military uniform, or or beret or something, is just.
So, could they have paired him up with Akeem? Possibly.
In a perfect world.
Because I really want Tugboat in his like Iraqi gear, and I want Akeem in his African gear, and I want that to be a tag team. I'm gonna buy 2K18 just so I can make this happen.
There we go. Stay tuned to Twitch later this year when you watch Steve's or Ross's E-Fed, where he watches My Career Mode, where Iraqi sympathizer Tugboat and Akeem, the African Dream, win the tag team titles for like 3 years straight. With Ross creating himself as their manager. That will be But nobody's able to argue with it. Go down on SQW's official ruling, and it's not just for SQW, but it's for the entire world, that Ric Flair is the #1 professional wrestler of all time.
Woo! Woo!
Oh God!
What have we done?
Oh God! Oh God!
So
we're all gonna bleed now.
We're going to be able to just end this without thinking of another funny thing to say about Ric Flair. Oh, Ross is gigging him.
Yes. Can't fire me, I'm already fired.
I'm elbow dropping my jacket as we speak.
That's good. See, we don't have a camera, so you can. Please, Flair, keep the shirt on.
All right.
And I think it's time to just sign off and say, if you've listened through this entire thing,
God bless
Bless your poor soul. You are a stronger man than I will ever be.
I'm sorry.
I'm not going to listen to this.
You already lived through it once.
Lived through this
Was enough.
nightmare.
Tune in for our next podcast where me and JJ will talk about Ole Anderson for 2.5 hours.
There's going to be a more well-structured plan going forward for this. But I want to thank you for listening. Thank you for watching this. If for whatever reason you're watching this on YouTube right now, to this part, you didn't turn it off 10 minutes ago when we chose to declare, and you're still watching. SQW, the podcast itself, will be keep doing its thing. Me, John, and Dolly will be back probably in the very short future with another pay-per-view roundup. In the meantime, if for whatever reason people want to interact with any of you three, do you want to give out your Twitter handles?
Sure. I am at Ross Martin ATL.
I am at S Morrison 085.
And Nick.
I am at Real Donald Trump.
Thank you. So that's why I haven't seen your tweets for a while. You blocked me.
I am at DJ Jazzy Jones.
And I am at _double_J. You can follow SQW at SQW Podcast on Twitter. And we are on iTunes. This one probably won't be.
Why? What happened?
I don't know what happened. I want. But thank you so much, and watch match, because we told you that they're the number one. He's the number one professional wrestler of all time, and now you have no choice but to make him your favorite wrestler of all time. That's just the rule. That's what happened with this. It is officially, we have mailed the letter to the White House. I'm sure Donald Trump's going to sign that letter any minute now, as the national wrestler. So you expect to see him accepting an award, I'm sure.
Yes.
Once he's out of the hospital. Thank you. Or at least, keep shilling your t-shirts in the hospital room. It's all good. I don't care what you do. You're a treasure.
Treasure.
Yeah. So thank you again, everyone, and thank you three for doing whatever this was.
Being ourselves, basically.
It is late for everybody. It is late for everybody now. So good night. Thank you.
Good night.
And subscribe to the show.
Good night.
Sorry.